you. What makes me me, or Neil him? Join us on Uplift. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Uplift. Whether you're watching this live or in replay, we appreciate you. My name is Sarah Wade. I'm coming to you live from Perth in West Australia, and I am fun amongst a lot of other things. Neil, if you were to describe yourself in one word, how would you describe yourself?
I was going to use fun, but I'll go. I will go exuberant.
Ooh, exuberant. Now, Neil and I have obviously known each other for a while now. We are co-hosts, and Neil is joining us from Calgary in Canada. And I know that this exuberant man and this fun woman are going to have an amazing conversation right here for the next hour. We haven't got a guest today. Why? Because we want to talk to you a little bit more about us. We want to share our meanness. And we would like to know if you would like to join the conversation. What makes you you? So please drop into the chat box. Let us know so we can have a really cool conversation. Neil, exuberance, hey? Has that always been something you've done or been?
You stole my word. I love to have fun. Life is, and I didn't want to use the same word, but we could in life because it's the same. I'm very passionate about life and I'm very exuberant at times. And sometimes I'm an extrovert, sometimes I'm an introvert. And like right now, I'm looking at the lighting I've got going on here and I'm thinking, in 2005, I was a professional photographer. What kind of crap lighting have I got going on here? And then I'm looking at your lighting and I'm going, it's a wonderful lighting. It highlights your beautiful hair and face. And I'm like, something's not good here.
It's an interesting journey from knowing your stuff and as a photographer and the lighting that helps others to doing it for yourself in your studio. To how have you noticed the differences affecting you between your past as a photographer to where you are now as a life coach?
Both of them required me to pay attention to the subtleties and details, because we all catch the real big baseball hit across the side of the head. But as a coach and as a husband and as a lover of life, it's when I pay attention to the subtleties of life, that's when it's really rich. And I really personally get excited about life when it's the subtleties. Like we all can know what a sunset looks like. And if we say that it's orange and it's beautiful orange, that's not really descriptive. But when we say that there's many different shades of it, and we start to describe the shades and the intricacies and the subtleties of it, because the sunset, as it changes and goes from really bright to dark, it changes. And it's our ability to observe the differences and appreciate the differences, I believe, that help us make us unique and appreciate the most. And as an artist, I suspect if you could only see two colors, black and white, and that's all you could ever deal with is one shade of black and one shade of white, you could make art from it, but it might not pull so much to you.
Yeah. I looked into that many years ago. I absolutely I love that subject because a lot of people do have traumas throughout their life and they do lose their sight. So yeah, those subtle nuances of those sunsets and sunrises and changes in scenery. As a child, I grew up, my mum is very artistic and loved, I remember her sort of tooting her horn quite often. I've got 20/20 vision. She's now had multiple surgeries on her eyes with cataracts and glaucoma, and she's losing a lot of her eyesight. And I know as we age, it's one thing, but also, for someone who's so previously so passionate about what she can see, and having had clients in the past who were almost blind when I was working as a support worker, it is a really interesting conversation to have with someone to describe that sunset, those little details, especially to somebody who's lost their sight, who can really, their synapses light up and they can almost see through your eyes the way you're describing things. It's a deep and beautiful thing that we can share. And I trust that, as you're writing, you sort of you must have to tap into that sort of stuff as a best-selling author, right?
As a writer, I try to invoke an expression of what a sunset is, but I only want to paint enough of the picture to get people to believe and think about the sunset so that they paint the picture in their own minds. My first book, A Warrior's Heart, The Awakening, I never once tell what my main character, his name is Graham, his hair color. Never once tell you his hair color. And one of my favorite questions I've asked after people have read my book, what color is Graham's hair?
I'm assuming you get a plethora of results because everyone's just injected their own assumptions here. Yep. Is that right?
And it isn't till in my book 3 that I say that Graham is living on an island, and I never once say the color of the beach till I accidentally say it's a white sandy beach in the 3rd book. And I wasn't supposed to say that, but it just made the way I was writing at the time, it came out as white sandy. That was the only time.
Yeah. And that makes a huge difference too. I mean, I grew up in Australia, and I'm sure you have seen images of Australia with a really lovely white sandy beaches and there's beautiful almost turquoise waters. Whereas there are other countries like, I went to Bali recently and there were black sands, there's countries all over the world. And what my normal is, the teal and the white. I was completely shocked by the blue and the black. How about you? Like when you go to the ocean, it's a little bit of a track for you from where you are in Calgary. What are the colors that you see there?
Well, it's just like you. Well, in Canada, it could be a light brown, it could be a dark brown. Or there's gray sand, and then when we travel to Costa Rica, you get the black. So it's entirely different. And as a writer, I like my reader to fill in the colors and paint the picture in their own mind. I need to give them, as a writer, enough information so that they know that it's a dense, thick jungle, and there's a sandy beach and the water's lapping up, and they can hear so that they can picture all of this. But you, as an artist, you need to somehow evoke and add this feeling of emotion into your painting so that I can see that it's there. But real great artists make me feel and hear and draw me right in. Doesn't matter what you're painting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for me personally, I love when I see, like Anne Doe, who's a comedian in Australia, is also a writer. She-Wolf is the book that I'm reading to my daughter at the moment, 1 of 4. His style of art is actually quite interesting because he uses a palette knife to paint. He doesn't use a brush. So that in itself creates some beautiful texture, which, I mean, I love texture in art. But the colors that come through, if you painted my face, there would be bits of green in there. Like, my face isn't green unless, Maya's thrown a bit of I don't know, grass or food dye on me. Apart from that, I love the fact that with art, by embracing colors that we don't necessarily see, it builds that bigger picture. And we can create that internal story that you were sort of sharing, that you inspire your readers to create as they read your books.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's done, like Picasso paints, to me, some of the weirdest things, but it invokes emotions, positive or negative. And then as an artist, when you evoke an emotion, positive or negative, you've done your job.
Absolutely. And I mean, that I'm an art therapist, and quite often, personally, when I was training, and also having experienced both sides, you've met my supervisor Janine Cameron, who has been a previous UPLIFT guest. We can evoke emotion. We can share stuff that we can't with words sometimes. And I love the fact that you can put a mark on the page, and that represents that white sandy beach, and it could be the jungle next to it, but all it is one little mark. But that's what that is, and you don't have to concentrate on the aesthetics of it, because there's more to look at in the rest of the picture, so to speak. And I think, like, looking at those little nuances, what's in that gap, what's in that space, why is that so cramped, it's really indicative of our lives. And to reflect back those little things, like what do you relate to or not relate to, is that a conversation that you would also have with readers?
Well, I'm going to say yes, because I'm telling a story and they're painting in pictures. So I want them to go in a particular direction. But they don't have to, because they can take something. I've had people tell me something that I did not intend that was in my book, but they got out of it. And I'm like, okay, they took a deeper meaning. And and just as a segue, you were talking about this horizontal line. Our family at one time, we were gathered and playing Pictionary. It was boys against the girls.
Ooh.
And the girls, I think we had done 2 or 3 back and forth, and the girls were winning. And my Tina, my wife, drew a horizontal line. And my sister-in-law looks at Tina and goes, "Sunrise." And that was it. And she goes, "Yes." And the boys, we just said, "We're done." When you can get a sunrise out of a horizontal line, we just said, "Screw it. We're not going to win this. We're just going to." So we pouted and we left. We said, "No way."
That's relatable. I remember playing, what's the name of the game? You do a movie or the words, whatever the name of that game is. If someone can help me out and tap that in, write that into the comments books, I would appreciate that. We were playing a game, and my sister just literally went, and her friend knew immediately it was Mary Poppins. Like, I don't understand this, but they did. And that connection that we have with others is such a beautiful thing, isn't it? When someone can finish those sentences for you or fill in those blanks. Like, please tell me what that game is, guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember when I used to read a lot of Anne Rice in the, I think, 90s, late 90s. I was reading a lot of Anne Rice, and the Vampire Lestat came out. And having read a lot of the books, I'd formed an image in my mind. And like Brad Pitt, that was helpful. Tom Cruise, not so helpful. It reduced my I didn't get into the movie so much because it wasn't what I had envisioned.
Absolutely.
Going forward into like the Harry Potter books and the like, which I really enjoyed whilst I was traveling. They were good and easy to pick up anywhere, anytime, any place. I was spending a lot of time fruit picking and weeding all sorts of amazingly huge farms as I traveled around Australia. And to pick up one of those fantasy books was just a beautiful way for me just to go. And then the movies came out, and they weren't quite, like, they didn't quite match up. And it was a different experience again because it was an interpretation and wasn't my interpretation. So I think these interpretations are really important because, you know, we've all got a view of the world, and that view can change over time, don't you think?
Yes, and I love how we all do it, and we, especially from books to movies. And I know many people refuse to see the movie after they've vested so much time in a book. And yeah, it's amazing because I've read some books, and then when I've gone to the movie, I'm like really having to go, okay, this is an interpretation, just let it be. And then you get to what I thought was a really important, pivotal scene in the book, and it's like through it. And I'm like, ah!
Character development, no!
Absolutely.
We'd love to know, guys. Drop into the chat box. What's your favorite book or movie, or what's your favorite way of expressing yourself? Obviously, for me, it's art. You know, I really enjoy it. But behind me right now, I did a new image on the weekend, and I did some flow art, and it's got some selenite crystals sprinkled in there too. I personally find it a lovely way of letting go of control.
How so?
Well, as a mum, you know, as a single mum, I'm looking after my daughter quite a bit. You know, I've got routines to stick with and things to do. Same as my role in business, I've got things to do. Whereas with the fluid art and with like watercolor and a lot of other types of creating, you can just let go. And I had a client about 2 weeks ago who did did 2 images. One represented the struggles that she went through, and one represented her dreams, and she really struggled with the lack of control. Whereas, as I mentioned before, I relish that. You know, I really enjoy giving up that control. And it was really interesting to watch how she developed over the course of the 2 hours that we spent in her one-on-one, how she went from being this, I don't like this, wearing gloves, to taking the gloves off, getting her fingers in and getting messy. And then she kind of half cleaned it off instead of really cleaning it off. And she sat there and mentioned, you know, how powerful that was to relinquish that control. Yesterday, Maya and I decided to go after school. We went to the park and we saw an island. And we thought, yeah, we can go over and explore the island. It's got this beautiful paper bark tree on it. It was like sandy, maybe about 1.5 meters up, where there was a little bit of mud that, you know, a dried lake. We could cross this. The mud was a little bit deceiving, and the control that I thought that I had over the situation had vanished suddenly because I realized, oh, my foot is like, my whole shoe is now under the mud. And Maya, maybe we should try it another way. Meanwhile, she's like just gone charging in and, Mom, help. So she's literally stuck like up to her knees in this seemingly dry mud. And, you know, the situation was completely out of our control as the mud sucked us in. You know, we were having fun saying, oh, it's quicksand. Oh, help me. But I think, you know, living in that moment and having fun, like I could have said, oh, this is disgusting. It's time to go home. You know, we ended up having a really good time in the mud and then pretty much stripping everything off before we got into the car, putting it all in the boot and having a really good time. And I know that we're going to write about that. I know that we're going to create images about that and turn it into a story because it was a really fun story. And I think she took a lot out of that. And I'm sure she'll be sharing that with her friends. And I love that those little things can be shared and in conversations that can really uplift the spirit.
Absolutely. And it's amazing. Like, you could have been the adult in that moment and gone, no, we don't need to. I don't want to spend the next hours cleaning up the boot, cleaning up. The clothes, you know, the mud might not come out. Or you embrace the, okay, we're here. Let's make the best of it. Let's play.
Yeah. And it was fun. It was really fun. The part that wasn't so fun for me was trying to pull, like, out. Literally, I was like up to almost my armpits trying to find shoes because that wasn't so fun. However, the sound was brilliant, Neil. The sound of the squelching.
Yeah.
Oh, it was great. So we really invited our senses into play, and wow, it was wonderful. So uplifting.
And I invite our listeners or our viewers, whether you're seeing this live or on replay, go back to a moment that you were really having fun. And I suspect those opportunities where you were involved in more than one sense, that you might have got smell and taste and sight, and you've gotten the tactile experience of the goo between your fingers. You might have been almost getting all 5 of your senses going. And to me, that's some of the best times.
Absolutely agree. And just between you and me, the smell of the mud wasn't amazing. But all the other senses were like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I grew up in the 80s. I grew up as a kid who was allowed to get muddy. In fact, our house in Queensland was made out of mud bricks. So we literally have photos of all of the family and other people coming to the property and making mud bricks, which my introduction to the world as a toddler. You know, get muddy, have fun, go. It's a stark difference to the really PC controlled version that my daughter's generation grows up in. And I noticed that a lot of parents now aren't letting their kids getting muddy, whereas obviously I encourage that. One of our favorite things to do is to get muddy and to play with sticks and to get into nature. How about you, Neil?
I was.
Oh, I've lost your sound. I don't know if you can hear me. I can't hear you at all. So I can see there's a couple of people watching this live. If you can hear both of us, let us know. No, you've dropped out, Mayan. So guys, let us know. I'd really be appreciative if you can hear Neil or if you can hear me, because something's just happened my end, or if it's happening for over, still can't hear you, mate. So while he works on that, I'm really curious to hear about what your favorite experiences are. Ooh.
You can hear me now?
Yay!
I don't know. I have a very expensive microphone hanging over here, and it just stopped working. So I've moved to my inexpensive webcam microphone, and it appears it's working.
Yay! How good is technology? Woo!
Yeah. As I was saying, I have 3 siblings, and my mother was not big on getting all of us muddy at the same time. And we usually traveled in packs and did everything together. So generally, we stayed away from things that would make us muddy, but we tried and experienced lots and lots of crazy things.
Wonderful. Wonderful. What's one of your favorite moments from childhood then?
I could pick an age. I don't know. Playing football or North American football with my sisters, hanging out in a tree in the family yard with the little apples, crab apples, and picking them and building forts in the backyard, whether it be a wooden fort or blanket fort in the house or a snow fort in the winter.
It sounds tremendous. That's awesome. For me, one of my favorites was I used to, my parents split up when I was quite little, and I initially went to Sydney, where my dad stayed on the Gold Coast, and then we flew over to Perth a number of years later. And one of my favorite things to do was in the school holidays, we would fly over to Dad's and often spend Christmas, New Year's, and into January, which is our longest school holidays in Australia. one of my favorite things to do was climbing a mountain, which was first discovered by Captain Cook as he was traveling around Australia to literally discover Australia, Mount Warning. And it was literally there because, warning, beyond here, if you keep going north, there's reefs. Be careful, guys. Your ship probably won't make it if you keep going that way. However, Mount Warning is this beautiful place. You can hear lyrebirds singing. There's these beautiful little quandong trees, and it's just a lovely little dense and really green, stark greens, especially compared to Perth, which is quite low in the green spectrum, more brown than green. But going over there and really I remember getting off the plane and or even in the plane, looking out the windows and saying, yes, green, I'm home. And then getting out there into that mountain. And one of my favorite things to do was climb it on the 31st of December, although it was probably just after midnight that we started climbing or just before, and we would get up to watch the sunrise. So it was about a 4 or 5, even 6 hour trip, depending on how old we were, how big our legs were and stuff. And climbing up the top, and the last thing before the very peak, you have to climb up this cold metal chain, and scale up the last part to the absolute peak. And we would see the first rays of sunlight in all of Australia for the year. And I just remember it feeling so magical. Just like, that the sunrises for me had this beautiful, like, tingling sensation anyway, but just that peak of color as it popped through, and the ray as it just hit the sky. It was absolutely phenomenal. And moments like that, those memories like that, I will never, ever forget. And I really hope that I can take my daughter over to experience that in the future too.
Maybe the mud will be one of those.
I hope so. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Neil, you've been by yourself recently. Tina has taken off to go do Tina things, and I'm curious, how has Neil handled his Neilness?
Tina has returned, and I'm doing very well. But Tina returned, and she's had some really big health issues. So it's been an interesting evolutionary experience, because we're having to she's normally what I would call an ever ready Energizer bunny. She's just go, 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 and she is not. So it's required me to switch roles slightly. Tina needs to spend more time doing nothing, introspect, just being, and I'm the one that needs to step out of my comfort zone, be the Energizer, do and do and do and do. So it's interesting, as like any time. I believe that any time in any relationship that you're with, and a long-term one, as one goes through something, if you're going to be there to support them and grow with them, the other is bound to go through lessons and learnings. It won't be the same one, but it will be lessons. So it's lessons as how I can support, and lessons of how Tina can be a better patient, I can be a better caregiver. So it's interesting.
And I think that's one that a lot of people can relate to too. The changing of roles, at times, and also, overcoming stuff and relying on others for support. Whether or not you ask for help, that's another situation. But those roles, I did a reel recently looking at all the different roles that I have in my life, and I have a lot of roles, and my favorite role of all is Sarah. I'm an all-encompassing version of all of those types of roles. Go for it.
And I find that interesting, because wasn't it like 15 years ago, Sarah was not your favorite person?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Probably closer to 20. Yeah, actually, Neil. 20 years ago, I would have been half the age I am now. I'm 40. And I was in a DV relationship. I was not in a great space at all. I'd been drugged unbeknownst to me, daily, and stuck in a house and beaten and hurt and sexually assaulted regularly by someone that I trusted. I also had a foster son who got dumped on our door at the same time, or halfway into that relationship. A 13-year-old street kid that I'd met in Perth was looking for help and made his way over to where we were in Tasmania. Knew that I'd helped him, as when I was going to TAFE and studying, I would walk past him and we would have a conversation, because homeless people are real people too, right? They deserve that interaction. And I'd often buy him food and we'd have conversations. Anyway, skip forward like 3 years, he ended up arriving on our doorstep. Me not in a great space, really not in a great space at all. His being there, however, gave me a purpose for living. I saw his drug addiction, didn't say my own. I saw his and thought, I can help you. He stayed with me for about 18 months. And in that period, we had travelled up through Queensland with the guy that was abusing us, unfortunately. It wasn't until we made our way over to Alice Springs, where on 9/11 of all days, he broke my arm and hurt me for the very last time. My arm was broken. My dog's nose was broken, him trying to defend me. And the emotional scars seemed like nothing in comparison to I can break free of this. I have this opportunity. Police came and took him away. Although, I still was scared shitless. I mean, I was in Alice Springs, not knowing anybody, in a very strange for me town. But that was the start of me changing. Like, it was a decision in me that, you know what, I don't have to remain unemployed because I'm no longer drugged and kept inside, whether that be the house or the vehicle. I can get out and I can do what I want to do. And I actually ended up going straight into hospitality because it was an easy job. My dog would join me, like come and sit outside wherever I was working, or in my bus. I parked my bus at some 5-star hotels where I got jobs as breakfast chefs and restaurant supervisors. And because I have an innate quality of talking, and despite the negative space that I was in, it just clicked. It just clicked. It was about 3 days after 9/11, after all the dust had settled, after my arm was in a cast and things were getting better, that I can do anything. And that led me then into chefing, and I met some most amazing people from all over the world who literally had been island hopping and came to Australia just to experience, living in Australia. A lot had traveled from overseas and had instilled this curiosity in me. Like, whilst I traveled around Australia and I had seen a lot of beautiful things, I hadn't experienced what was outside of Australia. I did hear, this is the best country. This is awesome. But it didn't feel like that because of my personal situation. My personal situation was quite negative at the time. I sort of looked down on everything. Whereas when I got into the world of chefing and I was hearing these inspirational stories of people and their travels, and I remember this one time I was working at a hotel. It was a 5-star hotel, and from the dining area in Alice Springs, I watched the most glorious sunrise, Neil, as the sun peaked up, and it just bounced off all the windows and all the stunning scenery. It lit something up in me. I was like, this is me. I love nature. And the hairs of my arms stuck up then and now. And I thought, yes, this is really part of who I am. And that led me on my journey of recovery and started this whole new way of life. And then unfortunately, of course, I fell over as a chef when I got back to Perth and hurt my back and ended up, needing infusion, stuck in my bedroom for a long time as I healed. And a different part of my journey then unfolded and led me to, exploring people like Nietzsche. Can you pronounce that better than I can? Thank you. An amazing group of philosophy and all these new concepts that I had abandoned for some time started coming back into my awareness, and I started to explore the psyche and really having fun at as I explored who I am. Now, did you have a similar experience, exploring who you are after you had the brain trauma?
Yes, because in June of 2012, well, in May of 2012, I was medically diagnosed with having high mercury levels in my body, which was leading to some health issues. So it was decided that I should go through chelation therapy, which is the removal of the mercury. And the first thing they said is that I needed all the mercury fillings in my mouth because that was the only place that they could figure out where the mercury was coming from. So I was having them removed, and then they told me, Neil, you need to give yourself a couple days between dental appointments and this injection that I was getting that would purge the thing. Yes. Well, Neil Thrussell here. Entirely, I don't blame any of the medical systems. Nobody blamed other than myself. So I went for a dental appointment at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. I then went for my chelation therapy at noon. And I went to my martial arts class on a Tuesday. On the Monday, I could do what was called a pattern. So it's just a series of moves and blocks and that, and I led the pattern for the class. Tuesday at 5 o'clock shows up, and the instructor goes, "Okay, Neil, lead." I knew none of the 5 patterns, zero. And all I could think, and he could see the terror in my eyes, so he stepped in and led class. And he's like, takes me aside after and goes, "What's up, Neil?" And I said, "I can't remember them. I do not know any of them." And then I walked back to my car and I went, "Holy," and I said bad words because I'm like, how do I get home?
Wow.
I remembered all of the driving rules. I could drive the car by road, but I had to think, okay. So I got in the car and my car knew the way home. And when I got home, I knew I was in serious, serious trouble. So we phoned the doctor to get me in as fast as we could. But at that point, I could get lost in my neighborhood. You and I could just have had a conversation, and I could turn around and walk back and look you in the eyes and go, "Hi, Sarah, it's great to see you. What's new?"
Oh no.
So what one of the joys of the entire thing was is I had no reference to you. I had no prejudice, no prehistory of you. So everything that came out of your mouth was new to me and a new way. And I had to learn to listen and truly listen as to that. I wouldn't go, "Oh, it's Sarah. She's prattling on about whatever." It was, this is the best thing. I was listening for the nuances in your conversation, paying attention to what was getting exciting, getting you excited about. And it was like, whoa. So it taught me a whole new level of listening. It took 2 years before I felt comfortable driving on my own without Tina to direct me.
Wow. 2 years.
2 years. I could drive. I knew all the rules of the road. I was a safe driver, but don't ask me to do anything. I was still working in a 9 to 5 at the time, and my 9 to 5 knew I was in trouble because I could remember copious amounts of detail and I couldn't. So that I could no longer lead projects. I had to do simple tasks, stage 1, 2, 3, and I had to write all of the steps out. And that was to put structure in to my life. And it made me realize the importance of friends and friendship. Because without them, it was terrifying to know that I couldn't be trusted on anything that I knew without. So friends could play tricks on me and I would believe it. They would say, Neil, this is, and I would go and do it because I didn't know. But with good friends, they looked after me. They made sure that I was doing the right things for me. And I learned to truly appreciate people for who they were and how they showed up. Because I could never be mad. You could have punched me in the head and 30 seconds later, I'd go, why is my head sore?
Goodness me.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. I mean, I've had my own rehab journey, but my mind has usually stayed strong unless I obliterated myself on the weekend before, and insert whatever you want to believe there. Yeah, I've heard, through people like Jim Quick, who I've been interested in, that the brain often remembers those rote sort of tasks, how to read and write, but maybe not so much, like you mentioned, like who are you? And, meanwhile it's your sister. How did your family handle that situation in general?
It took them a long time. Like I told them, but it took them a long time to believe it because I could get to A and B. And if I got really quiet, because I wouldn't interject into family stories because I didn't know. So I would be listening like, oh, do you remember the Christmas? And I'd go, no. And they'd look at me funny. And then they would tell the stories and I'd be absorbing it. And so it took them. But when they knew that I was out of my comfort zone, they would good naturedly tease me. What? Oh, did you forget this? And I'd just go, yes. And they would look after me.
Nice.
Like for me, the hardest part was I had finished my first book. And then I'm in the midst of writing my second book. And it was this book, Perseverance, which is my thickest of all my books. And I would have to reread the entire pieces that I've written. So when you're writing a 200-page book, you have to read the first 200 pages before I could continue. And I would have to do that every single time I wrote. So it was like, whoa, I love this. And reinvent and refine the characters and fall in love with them.
Who is this author? They are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, what an experience. And I think, I suppose, as you were able to look at the world sociologically, were there any lessons that you, now as you look back, you were surprised by? Curly question, sorry.
Yeah. Like it took me 5 years before, like if you're a teacher, a facilitator, it's how quick you can remember quotes and tie stories together. It took me 5 years before I could get back on stage again. And to me, Tina and I made this big announcement that I was coming back. And it was so heartwarming to know that people in my life that were light years ahead of me in their ability to teach and train show up and be in sit their bums in there because they loved me and they could see I get emotional just thinking about that they were there for me. And that has helped me recognize that whatever journey you're on, I, as a human being, if you are important in my life, I need to be there for you.
Touching. So touching. My eyes are welling up thinking of that.
And one of the lessons is I got wound up in, because I wasn't making, as I'm going through all this mental trauma, my coaching business had crumbled. I wasn't able to write as fast. I was all about money, and it was just thing. And one of my coaches, his name was is Stephen Garrett. He just said, Neil, there are people worse off than you. And I went like, yeah, no, whoa, pity me, pity me, pity me. He says, okay, fine. Here's your assignment. And when he said, here's your assignment, I knew that there was no choice. I'm going to do this. So he sent me out to go and be with street people. And so I spent a day learning about life from the point of view of a street person. And so it wasn't from a place of I'm better than you, but it was like I took it on as I am their apprentice, I am their student. What can you teach me? And was so powerful. I love my teacher and mentor Stephen Garrett for providing that opportunity and encouraging me to do that.
Wow. I was on the streets for a number of years, although I was lying to myself. I said I was traveling, but realistically, I was living out of my car. And there were times when money got tight. We ended up sort of traveling from farm to farm quite often to get a little bit of money, and skipping meals to get there. And then there were times where I was, say, in Melbourne and had nowhere to go. However, there were people around who knew the situation, knew where to go for different things, and where you could go to get free meals, or you could peel some potato for your meal, to give back. There's a lot that people who live on the streets can offer, because they've rejected the notion of, or a lot of rejected the notion of money, which is part of the reason I ended up on the streets. I left my family with millions of dollars and rejected that to go out and find who I was. I remember going to Sydney a couple of years ago for a business development event, and it was go out and find someone to give you, I think it was $200, and then in return, I'm going to say it was $500 or $1,000. So someone gives you $200, you get back first, and the prize was win $1,000. Now, I watched people go off in all sorts of angles. My money story at the time wasn't so good, so I had a little bit of a croaky teenage voice sort of happening. And the one person that I watched so many people go past was the person who had the most nous in this situation, and that was a homeless person. So I asked him, how would you get 200? And I watched these people going past with their business stuff, and I'm doing this course, give me money, accosting people at ATMs. This guy had a wealth of information and was really curious to learn. What was one of those things that your experience with people on the streets taught you?
Compassion. Yeah. All they were looking for was to be treated with compassion.
Yeah.
They were human, and all they wanted is, yes, they can ask for money, and yes, they can do that, but all they wanted was to be a little bit of respect. If you can say no, just say, sorry, I don't have it. Don't lie, or just say no and move on. And they just wanted compassion.
I remember reading about Keanu Reeves, who's obviously a well-paid Hollywood star who travels the subway and regularly is spotted speaking to homeless people, spending days with them and learning and sharing with them. And it's a beautiful thing that we can do. I remember as a homeless person myself, if people did not look at me, it triggered me, like, this is like, I'm a human, I'm struggling, and you're okay with walking past. What if that was you? What if that was your daughter? Even the simple task of someone washing your windows or the windscreen, they're standing at traffic lights, say hi to them. You don't have to be a jerk.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a jerk to the person on the corner who's literally asking for help.
Yeah.
When did you last ask for help? How hard is it to ask for help?
For most people, that's, both of us as coaches know that for many people, that's one of the hardest things to ever do. And especially for the male psyche. As a male, we're historically taught to be the lone wolf. We need to figure it out ourselves. So for many men, it has to be, it's almost like the last thing that's possible for them to ever do. It's like they've got nothing else to lose. They have tried everything in their mind. So now I'll ask for help. But yet, when you look at it, it's the first thing to do. It life becomes easier.
Absolutely. Yeah, it does.
So did you get your $200? Did he help you? Your homeless man help you figure it out?
I love that you circled back to it. He had $200 on him, and we went back up with a bunch of coins. People had beaten me by about a minute with cash from accosting people at an ATM. We went there with cash, and the guy who hosted the event gave him 200 just because of the story.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stop talking now because I'm going to cry. It was beautiful.
I love that you took a unique approach, and that shows so much about you, but it also shows about the same mind, the mind that perceives the problem is this, can't get out of that problem, that you went out of the box to look for a solution. You applied a different set of artists. You, instead of everybody painting with oils, you went with pastels.
Yeah. Yeah. And who better to ask for help with asking for money than a homeless person, right?
And many people would have never, if there's 1,000 people in there, you might have been the one person, because your experience in life led you to that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I think most people at some level are afraid. What if I get, so they breathe on me and I get whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, there are diseases out there, and yes, we do need to be careful, but for the most part, they're human and they just need help. And like you asking for help, your version of asking for help is just at a higher level. You've got your basic needs covered. Now you're asking for help because you've got a better quality problem, and you're looking for a better quality solution. And that's what you and I do. We speak to people all the time, and they have quality problems, and I love quality problems.
I remember I went to San Diego for a workshop, and I was there for 7 days, and my Airbnb, I had to walk under this underpass, and a lot of homeless people were there. And I said hello, and I said hello for the first couple days. And then the morning on the fourth day, I'm walking, this homeless lady says to me, "Could I ask a favor of you? If I gave you money, would you get a coffee for me? Because I see you coming back and forth." And I said, "You don't need to give me money, but I'll get you a coffee. What do you need?" And she told me, because she was in a wheelchair, so it was not easy for her to get to the 7-Eleven, the local convenience store. So I walked and got her, and then I realized there's a whole bunch of homeless people. And so I just went and got like 10 coffees and walked back. And I said, "Okay, so I have these extra coffees. You tell me who I'm giving these to." And she says, "Just go down the row and give them all." And she's talking and telling me their names. So I said, "I'm not back till later tonight. Would you like another coffee?" Her eyes lit up, and I discovered that she had served in the Iraq War, and she was ex-military, was wounded, and she had just fallen through the cracks. So for the next 3.5 days, I brought her because she only wanted coffee, and I would stop in the morning. I left early, and I would stop in the morning and talk to her, and I would stop in the afternoon, in the evenings, and talk with her.
What a beautiful gift. I'm sure that
Mhm.
made the world of difference in her life.
And yes, but it
Mm,
made a world of difference in, from a very selfish point of view, it made a world of difference in my life because she was just so in the circumstances she was in, she still saw the positive in life. She had two legs blown off um, from the war. A shell went off close by to her and took out her legs, and yet she still had life was still good.
mm. Wow. I remember after I broke my ankle in 17 places a couple of, well, about a good decade ago now. There was one lady who'd been on a cruise ship, and we were in a recovery ward, four of us. There was a prostitute, there was this older lady, and then there was somebody, I can't remember the person next to me, but the other two across from me made an impression. The prostitute who was in there was still pimping out to the other wards, like in the rehab facility, and getting her needs met and meeting other people's needs. The lady opposite me, who had a little minor cut on a cruise ship, she ended up having her foot amputated, was the most positive person, I think, in the whole ward. And it wasn't coming from a place of toxic positivity either. It was coming from a place where, you know what? Yeah, it happened, and I'm going to do my darndest to learn how to use the prosthetic that she would have eventually been fitted for, and to live a healthy, happy life under my terms. I'm not prepared to go down this part of negativity. Now, as for me, and I was laying in this bed, like I had just tried to commit suicide. I was not in a great space at all. And there were these two lives opposite me. I could have gone down one path or another. I think I'm really, really proud of myself for overcoming everything I did, and listening, like you mentioned before, that learn to listen. It's such a beautiful thing, isn't it? When we listen to other people and we hear things maybe for the first time, even though they've said it multiple times, and you really understand stuff. It's so, so powerful. And getting to that place where, you know what, okay, the life that I've experienced some unpleasant stuff, but that doesn't mean I have to stay stuck. I don't have to keep remunerating that stuff. I don't have to keep thinking about that bomb that went off that made me lose my legs. Whatever is your situation, you can choose to change. And there's this really magic 4-letter word out there, and it's not a swear word. It starts with H and ends with help. And there are a lot of people out there willing to help you. Sometimes you just need to ask. And yes, that can be hard, as Neil said, for men, but it can be hard for women as well, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I know that, like, in the past, I've tried to, I've been in courses where they've told me to write books and, to share my meanness. How can someone like myself, who's learning how to write, get some benefit from spending time with you now?
Great question. And I'm like, there's just so many ways to answer the question. If you're going to start to write, the first thing I tell you to do is just write. Just write, just write, just write, just write. Don't edit. Don't just write. Write for the love of it. Just throw it on the paper. You can edit later. And that's the first step. Know why you're writing. Why are you writing? Who are you writing for? And if it's entirely ego based that I just want a book, so be it. Know why you're writing. If you want to help people, know who you want to help so that you can formulate the language. Like if you want to help children, you need to articulated in a way that the words aren't too big. If you want to help medical professionals, then you have to make sure that your language is the correct way for them. You have to figure out whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction. You need to know who you're writing for, and then just write, just write, just write, just write, just write, just write.
Absolutely. I love that. And yeah, that can be one part of the process that can really trip people up, is that where do I start? So your advice is just write. Just start.
Like there's excuse me, so many ways that you can start it, and I do offer a program in it, but I really it's part of the 7 steps into self-publishing. But even if you take my workshop that is I'm running continuously, I'm running 3 this week, but I'm going to run them every 5 or 6 weeks so that I get people into them. But there are methodologies and there are frameworks that you can do to help corral your thoughts, but all of them are still going to be just write, just write, just write, just write. Put it down, put something down, and you will eventually come up with something. And don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to look for communities. If you're writing a novel, there's a group called NaNoWriMo, which is National November Writing Month. And in November, you write novels. There's hundreds of Facebook groups. You can join my Facebook group. There's writing communities. There's meetup groups. Join or take my 7 steps to self-publishing and go to neilsrussell.com at events.
Well done. And what an amazing journey too, to have gone from that place where you couldn't remember anything to now teaching again. For me personally, the part that I picked up on when you were sharing was that just put that first mark down. And that is almost exactly one of the first things that I suggest to people to do, creating. Just put a mark. Just that first page. That I think what overwhelms so many people is that blank piece of paper. Whether you are writing or creating or painting, whatever you're doing, it can be quite overwhelming just to see that white space. And I think that's why a lot of people are starting to enjoy the adult coloring in books at the moment, because it gives you some way of doing something. It's methodical and rhythmic, and it can look pretty. That's not what we do in Evolve. We tend to do things that aren't aesthetically pleasing, because they don't have to be. More damage happens, I personally feel, like trying to make things look pretty when our lives aren't pretty. And in Evolve, which is my 9-week program, people get to express themselves in symbols, in metaphors, in dance, in so many different ways. And we're coming up. Tomorrow is going to be our last day of this round of Evolve. And the amazing, I love the breakthroughs my clients have been having. It's absolutely phenomenal. And the key thing that they've found is that you don't have to know why you're doing it. Just do it and gain the benefits. So if you're interested in just gaining benefits and not knowing why you're doing something, perfect, or perfect, as I like to say in Evolve, come and join me. The next round of Evolve will start on the 27th of April, and we'll be going 4 times in the year, running in concurrent with the Australian school term. And I trust that you let me know that it's okay to reach out and ask for help, whether that be with me, whether it be with Neil, whether it be with someone that you haven't spoken to for a long time, or somebody new. Go out there and find whoever works for you, who feels aligned with who you are today and the direction you may like to go.
Absolutely. And I would just like to leave, and I loved what you had said. I'd like to leave you, our viewers and our listeners, to reach out and connect with someone that you haven't connected with in a long time. And if you're comfortable with it, tell them that you love them. Tell them what they mean to you. really make this heartfelt connection so that you can uplift yourself and them together, so that it becomes an uplifting relationship. And that's my thoughts to leave you with today.
I love that. I'd like to add to that too. You can say what your favorite memory is with that person. This was my favorite memory with you. I'm happy to reconnect if you are. I'd love to learn what you got out of our time together, or phrase it however you would choose to phrase it. And really, sink that gratitude, share that gratitude, and be that gratitude, because that person came into your life for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now go out there and create those dynamic conversations, those uplifting conversations that truly set your heart on fire, and live those memories today. Until we speak to each other in a fortnight or in chat, we appreciate you. We look forward to seeing you soon on Uplift.
Know that you're loved.
Absolutely.